Hey guys, welcome to another episode of El Jefe's Chop Shop. This week I'm finally back in the shed after our trip to Japan. I finally had some time to actually get some stuff done on the Camry and the K24 turbo conversion. So let's get into it. Let's see what I've been up to. So when I arrived home from Japan, I realized the Camry's been up on the hoist, the Corolla was actually underneath it, and it had been leaking on the ground a fair bit. Like, it's not nothing. So I had ordered all the seals for that before we left, came back and jumped into replacing some seals. So let's do that right now. Get this thing to hopefully stop leaking because I am absolutely over it. Alright, it's time to work on the Camry. So this thing has been leaking like a sieve since I put this engine in this car. So I got a bunch of new gaskets and I'm going to rip the rocker cover off, replace the rocker cover gasket and all of the spark plug tube seals, and then I've got new seals for these bolts as well. So I'll rip all of that off, we'll have a look on the inside of the head and see what it all looks like, and then replace these seals with nice fresh stuff and try and stop some of this oil. So just quickly coming in here, you can see it's all actually very clean, which is awesome. And you can see the VTEC lobes on the cams as well, which is pretty good. So this was leaking pretty badly because you can see all of the grot through there. And then the back of the engine is covered in oil, which it really can't come from anywhere higher than this. And everywhere below this is covered. So just gonna put a towel over this for now, and then I'll clean all the stuff up and put it back together. So here is the rocker cover. I'm going to chuck it in the parts washer in a second and just give it another clean. So we're replacing these seals in here because they are pretty hard. They're not solid, but they're pretty hard. And then we're replacing this seal that's in here. Again, not super hard or anything, but it has had some goo in the corners, which, you know, it's kind of a good idea. So it's been replaced previously, but it's obviously still leaking. So I think that wasn't doing the job. And then we've also got the little metal things, little rubber and metal things that hold the rocker cover down. So I'm going to replace all of those because I've got new ones as well. So I bought these parts from Honda directly. There's 4 of those. There is 6 of those. And then a rocker cover gasket. And then I'm also, while I'm in here, I forgot about this, is the VTEC seal, which has a little mesh thing in it just where my thumb is. And also the crossover oil tube or something like that, or oil drain from the head. Mine looks a bit crusty, so I'll replace those as well while I'm in here. And then I've also got an exhaust gasket to go on once I pull the turbo off and it's ready to go back on for good. So I'll clean this up, fit those seals, and we'll put it all back together. So I have replaced the gaskets down the middle. And I've replaced the rocker cover gasket, again used a little bit of sealant in the corners. And then on this engine, I need to remove this block just here and replace a small mesh filter in there. And I also need to replace that hose just in there. So as you can imagine, it's going to be really hard to film. So I think I'll just cut forwards to putting the rocker cover back on. We're all back together. Everything should be buttoned up and sealed nicely. The only thing I didn't do is that hose that was down there that I said I was going to do, because it's really hard. So I'm going to wait till I got all the exhaust and manifold and everything off, and then I might be able to do it from the bottom, or I'll have better access from the top. The VTEC solenoid is resealed. The rocker cover gasket's resealed. The spark plug tubes were rock solid, so they're all resealed as well. And we shouldn't have any leaks, hopefully. So once the seat actually gets back together and running properly, then I'll be able to clean it all off, and hopefully we don't see any more leaks from anywhere, because I'm sick of leaky engines. But the VTEC seal I previously resealed. It is rock solid. And the spark plug boots, they have a metal piece in them, but they are so hard and crusty. So I'm glad I replaced all of these bits because they're all very well past their use by date. Now with those seals all buttoned up, It seems to be holding oil and not leaking it all out the bottom, which is great. So what I'm going to do is move on to the next job, which is fitting the intercooler. I've got a wastegate to go on. I've got a whole bunch more stuff to put this thing back together before I can actually drive it again. So let's jump into that right now. So I've had a little bit of time today and I've remade a bit of a cat pipe. So that was the original join that I had. I've added this cat and then I've got the original rear section. So that actually fits pretty good. So that is my road going setup for engineering and stuff. And then I've also started making a decat pipe with a better flex in it. So this will be my like getting tuned and stuff set up. So I need to TIG this together. And you can see how much bend there was on the front. So I didn't do a very good job of lining it up the first time, but this should be nice. So I've welded here. I need to do 1, 2, 3 more welds. So I'll just get into it, chuck you guys on time lapse and get this done. Okay, we're all welded up. So I'm going to run this over to the wire wheel and clean this whole pipe, make it look kind of nice. And I'm pretty much out of gas. So that's exactly what I was hoping for, because I need to replace that before I start doing aluminium. So I'll buzz this and show you what it looks like. So I've given that a quick whiz on the wire wheel. And as you can see, the welds are not great. I'm heaps better at doing the thick plate to the thin plate, thin pipe welds, and they're also 90 degrees. So I don't know if it's the 90 degrees or the fact that I can lean into this with heat and barely touch the pipe that makes it better. But the welds around here are average. Still learning, but we're getting there. Some of them are really good and then you just absolutely murder it. So chuck this on the car and this piece is done. There we have the decat pipe all polished up, all fully welded and bolted back on. So it's pretty much as high as I can get it without sort of kicking it back up and then back down again. But even if I do that, this will still be the lowest part. So that is in line with the tyres. So then that makes this the lowest part. And it's about 1 inch lower than this part of the subframe. So hopefully that's not an issue. And I would like to think that this being 1 inch lower than, oh sorry, that being 1 inch lower than this, the actual rail is lower. So we should be okay. I've never had any scraping issues with this thing before, so we should be fine. Then I've also pulled this apart and cleaned those threads because I put goo on it originally, which you're not supposed to do with AN fittings, and it was leaking. But I wasn't sure if it was the weld, so I've covered that in slabs as well, and then cleaned all of these and rejoined them together. So now I need to top that back up with oil and see if that's going to still leak. And then I'll move on to the next thing, which I'm not really sure what it is. I do still need to do the hose, which is in there somewhere. So that'll be fun, but I should be able to get to it from here, I think, but that's a later problem. I don't want to deal with that right now. I think the next thing I might do is put on this bonnet protector. So I said in the Falcon Saw episode that I was helping it clean out with an estate. While I was doing that, I saw this on the shelf. I was like, God, that looks familiar. It just looks very similar. And then when I was pulling it apart, I pulled it off the shelf, saw the Toyota accessories logo, and I was like, surely there's not that many Toyotas that this would fit. And it's for this Camry. So that worked out excellently. So I will make that fit just now and we'll have a bit more grandpa to add to the Camry. Alright, scratch that for now. I cannot find my nutsert gun anywhere. So let's move on to something else. So I'm not too sure which bit I'm going to do next, but I'll show you what I've got. So new exhaust flange because the one I've got is pretty old. We've got a few exhaust 2-bolt flanges. A Phoenix return flow intercooler. I've got that oil hose that I need to fix. Got a what I was going to use for the wastegate 2-inch flex, but this one is crappy and I've ordered another one that's different. Then we've got 2.5-inch intercooler pipes, a bunch of 45s and a couple of 90s, and then we've got a bunch of flexes as well. So I can use all of that to put the intercooler in and plumb that up. Then we have a 45mm Turbo Smart PRP combo wastegate, so this needs to go on the exhaust manifold. So I need to look into that and where it's actually going to fit. And then I have a bunch of spare axle pieces in case that comes a problem. Got some heat wrap, got a bunch more laser cut flanges, and pretty much everything to get this thing mechanically finished other than injectors and ECU and all the sensors. So not sure what I'm going to do next, but that's what we've got to work with. So let's get into it. So I said yesterday I wasn't sure what I was going to continue on with, and that was true. I've since continued on, and I've started making intercooler brackets. So got a little standoff here, so that'll bring everything down a little bit. And I've made this rad support connector panel, so this bolts to the rad support. This will be your intercooler mount, so I'll drill some holes in that. And then these will line up with the stock radiator. So this will push everything back. Then I can put the intercooler in the middle. So I'm just about to drill the 2 top mounts for the intercooler, and then this should all sort of fit in, and then I have to make the bottom half. I also need to drain the radiator because it's full of coolant still, and I need to pull it out shortly. So I'll get drilling and I'll get all this tacked up, and then you should be able to see what I'm going for. Other good news is that the area I fixed on the drain seems to have stopped leaking. There is obviously a drip there, but that's not what I fixed yesterday. So I think we've finally come good. So that is the plan. And conveniently the logo is up the right way. So I need to weld these little standoffs to this plate, to this RHS here, and then everything should bolt in nicely. So I need to make the bottom mounts for the intercooler obviously, and then remount the radiator back with the new bottom mounts and these top mounts. So I need to tackle that together, and then I'll probably pull the radiator out and try and get it in the car. So I've got the radiator out, now I can try and mock these two together, see how they want to play, and then work out what I'm going to do for the bottom mount. And the car is all nice and free, and I've removed the bottom mount that I made that was a bit dodgy anyway, because I knew this was going to happen at some point. So now we can move everything back, fit that intercooler in there, hopefully be off to the races. I've just quickly tacked together a piece here, so this is mounted off the original bottom radiator mounts. I've just put a bolt through there, and then that's spaced it back obviously, so now I've got something to work off of. So my hopes and dreams is that I can put the radiator in and it comes somewhere near there, and the little rings that are on the bottom that look like this can get tacked onto that wherever it may be. So that should hopefully work reasonably well. Let's see. Good news. So the radiator's in, the mount's in, so I had to put a bit of bend in it here. I'd like to put a bend in it back up again, but that's just going to be too hard, and I don't really have the tools. So now to get that radiator straight, and I can put the intercooler in and make bottom mounts. So I've got the bottom mount tacked together, so now the radiator is in its final position. Whether it's straight or not is a different question. There is actually clearance between everything here. It's quite dark obviously, but everything seems to be clearing. The intercooler is in there. You can't even really see it, which is pretty good. And I've got a pipe for the top started, and it actually fits pretty good. So the aircon will have to get moved, which I did kind of think it would anyway, for the bottom hose or bottom pipe, but we should be in luck. So I guess I'll pull this all apart and try and make a bottom intercooler mount. So I got incredibly distracted and mocked up the first intercooler pipe. So these are actually butted up, and it actually fits really nicely. This one could be a little bit longer. I wish it didn't cut off like this much, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. Need to bead roll either end, and then obviously weld those 2 joints. But I have no idea how to alley weld, so I'll have to wait until I learn how to do that. But I'm pretty happy with that one. As for the second one, I'm going to have to move all this AC stuff, come out, and then I'm going to go up on a bit of an angle. Well, actually, I'm going to go straight across because the intake comes down. So I'll go straight across and then up and over into the turbo. So along the chassis rail, then up and into the turbo. See how that goes. I might just keep tinkering, see how far we can get. This is pretty much ready to go. I just need to do the bottom mounts, which I completely forgot about and started doing that. Progress is progress, doesn't matter what order it's in. It's another very quick mock-up. So we've got a 45 coming out of the turbo, pointing down, 45 that goes in line with the rail, and then I'll need a 90 on the front that goes into the intercooler. So just left that in place roughly. Then the intake pipe itself will have a 45, which I'm waiting for, silicone joiner off of the turbo. It'll be a bit closer than that, but I can't get it to sit there. And then the filter will be about there somewhere with a mount off of the gearbox to hold it all still with the engine. And that's pretty much it. We're going to have a little extension in here just to make those pipes line up. But but it actually all fits pretty nicely. So then you'll have your turbo air come in through the filter, through down this pipe here, through the intercooler, and then up into the engine. I think that's pretty decent. So I still can't TIG, obviously, with the alley, so I'll just keep tinkering. I have to pull all this aircon stuff out anyway, so I guess tomorrow I'll pull it all out, pull all the aircon stuff off, mock all this up again, and then I have to put the aircon stuff back in somewhere, which conveniently there's a huge gap just there under the pipes. Can't really see it, but there's a big gap there. So I have to try and shove all that AC stuff down in there, and then we've got a pretty reasonably complete engine bay. Everything I need is in there, except for the wastegate, which is nowhere near any of this stuff. I'm pretty happy with all of that. So it's a new day, I'm back on the Camry. So I found my list last night finally, so I'm going to follow that instead of just doing random stuff. I'm going to get this intercooler mounted up, and then I'm going to put on the bonnet headlight protector thing, the plastic thing, and then we'll see where else we can get to today and see what else we can get finished. So I've pulled out the bottom brace. Now it looks pretty agricultural at the moment, but the idea is these pick up on the bottom of the intercooler, so I'm going to brace those with another piece of rod just there, and then these ones here have a bush that go in them, and then the radiator sits in those, and these two bolts that are welded on either end, they bolt through the rad support, so that keeps it nice and flat. This holds it up as well, and then you've got the radiator which is pushing down from the top, so it should all be pretty happy with each other. I'm going to cut all this off and make it look nice and clean all the rust off and make it look reasonable around some corners and stuff, but for now the plan is to just have those uprights there and then weld on a piece of rod like that so that it doesn't like flex and rip the welds off. Alright, I've ripped the mount out, fully welded it, given it a quick grind and wire wheel, so it's obviously still covered in rust. I'll get it maybe blasted or something and get it painted, or sit there with a wire wheel and fix it all up. I can't really be bothered right this second. So you get your two intercooler mounts, you got your two radiator mounts, and then you've got a mount for either end that goes into the rad support, and then the top got the same, so your rad support here, intercooler here, and your actual radiator here. So I'll round these off, I'll round those off, all that sort of stuff. But for right now, I'm going to rip all the AC stuff out the way, put all this back together, and then make that second intercooler pipe, get it all mocked up so I can get it tacked together. So I put everything back together, no radiator, just for a bit more clearance for my hands. I got the top pipe in, which is the one I made yesterday, and this one just fell together. So I made this yesterday, it actually went down and then up, and I had another piece of straight about 5 inches long, 4 inches long, but without that it also fits. So it's shorter, that's better. It clears this pipe, obviously, clears the bonnet, and then also this intake will fit. I still need that silicone which is on its way, but it fits so much better. I don't know, I'm really happy with that. So I've taped it all together, I need to get it tacked welded, and then I can weld it up properly later. So I'm going to have to try and call one of my mates to tack that together for me. But if you imagine a 45 silicone joiner there, and then I'll make a mount for this down here somewhere, which I'll do next, I guess. But that's pretty solid, I think. Looks kind of spicy. So there's been a lot of back and forth. Got my finger caught at one point. So got this all bolted back together. Radiator's in, everything clears nicely. The intercooler pipes, both top and bottom, both clear the radiator. So top one's all lined up, back one's all lined up. Now I've made a small standoff off the gearbox and then a tab up here. So the idea of this is incredibly hard to hold, is when that comes off of the turbo at a 45, this can get welded to that tab and it will hold it all nice and still and off of the engine bay, off of the fuse box and all that sort of stuff, and it will move with the engine, so it shouldn't rattle. So that's going to have to wait until I get that 45, which is really annoying, but that's all good. Everything clears there, I'm happy with all of that. So there's obviously a few more little sensors and stuff to plumb up and breathers and all that sort of stuff, but that's a later problem. So now what I want to do is go up in the air on the hoist and see how much aircon stuff I can fit in down there and what pipes do fit and which pipes will need fixing. So we'll go up in the air and have a look. Okay, so I've done up and down a million times trying to work out what can fit where. So The intercooler pipes are here, obviously. They come pretty much straight. So down in this little hole here, I can fit the aircon thing, the cylinder guy, I can't remember what it's called. That can fit down in there. And then this is off of the front of the condenser. And I'll run a extension. So this needs to be like 8 inches longer. Comes underneath that bottom hose and can actually go straight over here. And then this hose, which is the other of the two, can get welded up. I've cut a bunch of length out of there, so that actually all lines up pretty good. Just need to remount everything down in there. So I'll start working on that. I can't weld this, obviously. I'll have to get someone else to do it because it is well above my skill level. But I might be able to tack it, I guess, if I get gas and stuff for the TIG. And then the rest of it should actually line up pretty well. So speaking of gas for the TIG, I can't tack those until I've got gas. Can't tack this until I've got gas. So pretty much waiting for gas. And then I need the 45 off of there as well, just to make this all a little bit easier. So I'm going to keep tinkering with what I can. I'll drop that. I'll bead roll the ends of these and just get everything as finished as I can, and then get some gas in the next day or two. Okay, I've removed all of the aircon pipes that go to the back. The bigger one is just loose because I couldn't get the other one out. So that's all ready to go get welded. Don't know who's doing that yet, but I'll get it all tacked together at least, and then I might weld it all myself later. So I need to move on to the next step, which I'm not really sure what it is. Until I get those lines back for the AC, I don't really want to mount the circle thing until I know where that's going to sit properly and where the lines will allow. So the intake pipes are also in that box, ready to get tacked together. I also can't tack this together to the mount until I get gas or someone to come around, sort it out for me. But I know there is a huge mess here which needs to get sorted, so maybe I'll just dive into that. So I had a quick look up the back here and there is just chaos everywhere. There's a bunch of wiring that needs to get moved, which there's no point doing that until we have the ECU and we know that all this can either stay or get changed. The heater lines, one is touching the turbo as it is. We are coming up to summer, so I could get away with just looping it and ignoring it. But I'd like to make it work. I don't have the stuff to do that either. And then we've got this breather canister thing down here, which kind of needs some lines moved out of the way to make that work as well. And then we also need the wastegate on the bottom there. So without pulling everything apart, it's actually kind of a pain. So I might just leave it for now. I haven't got all that much time left today. And I might mount this bonnet protector. Okay, done 3 nutserts and 3 bolts, as it should be, I think, unless they were clips originally. This is clipped on, the other end is missing one, so I need to get some kind of clip or glue it all together. This seems really large, this gap here, so might have to fix that, or maybe it just needs to get shuffled. And then this side, it's obviously broken, so I'm going to have to just glue that. So I might just take that clip off and glue that side as well and call it good. I'm not worried about the paint on this thing. But there you go, a bonnet protector. They just don't look good. It's perfect. Absolute grandpa nugget. That needs more work, obviously, but that's where we're at. So I've moved a few of the aircon lines that run to this side back to where they were originally. Somehow lost the bush that goes in here. I flipped that over when I picked it up and it went that way and I can't find it. So I'll have to find that shortly. But I think that's going to have to do for now. And I'll get some welding gas and stuff and then get back into it. But I need to sort out this whole corner, and then there's some wiring over this side that needs to get sorted out. So there's a few questions, and then while I'm in here, I'd like to replace all of the O-rings that go on the aircon stuff, because all of this has to come out to get to the AC compressor and to actually reseal everything. So I'd rather do that now while I'm working on it, and I can put it all back in, knowing that there's fresh O-rings and everything. So hopefully that makes it easier. But pretty much just going to have to come back in a couple of days when I've got all the required pieces. So Aiden's just dropped past and showed me how to set up the welder and how to get some beads. So we've got a little bit of an idea going. I'm going to do a bunch of practice, and then I'm going to move on to the actual intercooler pipes, which are already cut, marked, cleaned, ready to go. So I'll weld a bunch of these pipes together, just make a mess and try and learn how to do it properly. And then once I'm reasonably confident, I'll move over to the good stuff. Just an important note for everyone. If you set up the camera for a hyperlapse, make sure you start recording, because if you don't, it won't be on camera. So I've done 3 pipes, and I'm basically the best TIG welder ever. That is a lie, but they're not horrible. Like, they're not great, but I'm pretty happy with that for a 15 minutes into TIG welding. So I think what I'll do now is let everything cool down again. I'll do this one as a last one, and then if I'm happy with that, I'll grab the good stuff and just get it together. Thanks, Aiden. I really needed another crash course because I could not remember, and I've written all of the details on here, so I shouldn't forget this time. Alright, they aren't amazing, but they aren't terrible. This one's heaps better. I was struggling with the gas settings because I've had a bit of an issue with the gas reg. But that's pretty good, and it's going to hold together. Well, I call that a win. So we've got the intercooler pipes welded up. So obviously the turbo and stuff is off at the moment, but this one goes up here somewhere and did fit when I marked everything, so hopefully it still fits. And this one's pretty mint, so I'm actually really happy with that. For first day of alley welding, or second shot at alley welding I should say, pretty happy with that. Some of them are much better than others, but I can live with that. And I'll probably paint them anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I got the pipes all welded up, then I jumped in the Corolla, and Jackson and I went for a drive into the city and did a bit of a tour. So we had a good afternoon just driving around. So that's going to bring us to the end of this episode because it is getting pretty long, and the next step is the wastegate and the rest of the manifold. So we need to finish that all off before we can install the rest of the stuff. So that'll be next week's episode. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you then.